Some mornings feel off before they even start. That Tuesday had that kind of air heavy, too still for spring. I woke up before my alarm, the red glow on the nightstand blinking 6:02 a.m. Melissa was already out of bed. That wasn't strange on its own. She usually liked to make coffee and listen to morning radio before her shift at the clinic. But the house was silent. No clinking mugs, no NPR voices humming through the kitchen speakers. It wasn't until I went outside to load my truck that the real alarm bells started ringing. Melissa's car was still in the driveway. I stopped short, keys in hand. She always left for work before me, always. Her shifts at the vet clinic started at 7 sharp and punctuality was her religion. Rain or shine, she was out the door by 6:40. It was nearly 7:15 now. I walked up to her car like it might offer me some kind of answer. That's when I saw her handbag sitting on the passenger seat. Bright teal leather. Unzipped. Her phone charger cord poked out the top, tangled around a travel-sized bottle of lotion. She never left without her bag, not even for a quick walk to the mailbox. I opened the door and caught a scent, strong, masculine, not mine. Something musky and overbearing, like cologne that wanted to be noticed. And there it was, clear as daylight, a navy wool scarf neatly folded on the floorboard. It wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. I just stood there for a second, staring down at it, not touching it. The scarf was quality, Taylor & Stone, the tag said. Not a brand I'd ever worn. And that scent, not just strong. It felt invasive, like it had been sprayed in the air just moments ago and was still trying to settle. My hand trembled slightly as I opened the glove compartment. Inside, tucked between napkins and expired insurance papers, was something I never expected to find. Her wedding ring. Melissa's wedding ring, a slim gold band with tiny etchings of ivy along the sides, was carefully placed inside her makeup pouch like a museum piece. I stared at it like it was evidence in a crime scene, and maybe it was. She never took that ring off. Not once in 12 years of marriage. I remember once she scratched her hand on the fence and refused to take the ring off even while cleaning the wound. Said she'd feel naked without it. That's what she always said. Naked without it. I backed away from the car and went inside. My thoughts were scattered, the kind of scattered that feels loud, like static inside your skull. Still, I knew I needed clarity, not suspicion. Facts. That's how I've always worked. I run a safe installation business. Security systems, lock repairs, precision engineering, it's what I do. When things don't line up, I notice. So I pulled up the app for our front door camera and scanned the timeline. Our system stores a 48-hour archive. I rewound the footage to early that morning, around 6 a.m. There she was, Melissa, stepping out onto the porch in her robe. Not just stepping out. Escorting someone. A man. Tall, about my height, short dark hair. He wore a long coat, and as they moved toward the door, he turned slightly, just enough for the camera to catch part of his face. I didn't recognize him. She opened the door slowly, like they were trying not to make noise. Then she hugged him. Not a polite hug. This was something else. Her arms went around his neck and his hands stayed on her waist for longer than necessary. They whispered something I couldn't hear, our camera doesn't record audio, and then she stepped back, gave him a soft smile, and closed the door behind him. I watched the rest in disbelief. She didn't glance around nervously. Didn't rush to get upstairs. She simply turned off the porch light, shut the blinds in the living room, and walked calmly back down the hall toward our bedroom. I sat there for a long time, watching that clip on a loop. The rational side of me was already spinning its gears, trying to come up with possibilities. Maybe it was someone from work. Maybe a relative I'd forgotten she mentioned. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But the ring. The hug. The time of day. When Melissa finally came downstairs around 8:10, freshly dressed in navy scrubs and her hair pulled back in that loose braid she always wore for work, I felt like I was seeing her through glass. "Hey, hon," she said, breezing past me to the fridge. "You already heading out?" I watched her, noting the way she avoided looking directly at me. "I might head out in a bit," I said evenly. "Thought you left hours ago." She paused, hand wrapped around the juice bottle. "Just a beat too long. I was up early but ended up laying back down. I've been so wiped lately." "Car's still warm," I said casually. "You go somewhere?" Melissa turned toward me, forcing a small laugh. "Oh yeah. My brother came by. I ran out to grab him some aspirin. His shoulder's been acting up again." I stared. "Your brother?" "Yeah, you remember Drew. He's in town for a couple of days." "Melissa doesn't have a brother. She's an only child. Always has been. You took off your ring." She glanced down at her hand and gave a sheepish smile. "Oh, that. I was giving him a hand massage. His joints are really inflamed. The ring was getting in the way." I nodded slowly, saying nothing. She sipped her juice like nothing was out of place. There are moments in life when you feel the crack before you hear it. That was one of them. The crack in something I'd thought was solid. A hairline fracture forming right down the center of our marriage, and the worst part was, she didn't even flinch. I didn't push her. I didn't argue or accuse. I just let her kiss my cheek and head out the door, telling me she'd be late tonight because of a surgery double booking. The moment the door shut behind her, I stood there, feeling the hollow weight of a truth that was starting to unearth itself, one lie at a time. And I knew this wasn't over. The lie stuck with me the rest of the day. Not because it was elaborate, quite the opposite. It was too easy, too smooth. Melissa had always been an over-explainer, the kind of person who couldn't fib without rambling herself into a corner. But that morning, she barely blinked. "My brother," she'd said, like it was a line she'd rehearsed. Only problem was, Melissa doesn't have a brother. I know her family, her stories, her scars. So either I was losing my mind, or something had changed. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling long after she fell asleep beside me. I could hear her breathing, slow and even, like nothing was wrong. And maybe nothing was. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But I couldn't shake that gut-deep certainty that something had been set in motion. Something I hadn't yet named. The next day I started digging. Not in a wild, obsessive way. At least that's what I told myself. I just wanted confirmation. A crack of light in the dark. I began with little things, the kind that build up in hindsight and make your stomach twist when you realize how many times you shrugged them off. First, her phone. Melissa had always been casual with her phone. It would buzz during dinner. She'd pick it up, laugh at a meme, and toss it face up on the table. But lately, that thing never left her side. Screen always turned down. Locked more often. I'd glance over and catch her exiting apps quickly, swiping away screens like smoke. She'd also started staying late at the clinic, more often than usual. "Emergency surgery," she'd say. Or, "We had a late drop-off." I believed her at first. I mean, she's a vet, emergencies happen. But I started checking timestamps. I'd call her around 6:15, and she'd answer out of breath, like she was caught mid-sentence. "Sorry, can I call you back?" Then silence until 9 o'clock. Every time, the same script. She'd also started going out on weekends. "Just me time," she said. "Solo hikes, antique shopping, mental reset days." I used to think it was healthy, that she was just carving space for herself. But there was always this friction in her tone, this nervous energy when she'd explain why I couldn't tag along. Then there was the beard trimmer. Found it by accident, tucked in the drawer beneath the sink in our shared bathroom. I shave clean, always have. My dad had a beard, and I used to watch him grumble through trimming and oiling and lining it up every week. I never had the patience. Melissa knew that. So whose was it? When I asked her about it, she didn't even look up from her laptop. "Oh, that? I bought it for the clinic. Sometimes we have to trim around wounds before stitching." Her voice was flat, practiced, too smooth. Again, I started scanning the footage from our front door camera. It records motion-triggered clips, 30 seconds, every time the sensor is tripped. Mostly just squirrels and delivery drivers. But one morning, I found something. 3 weeks earlier. 5:41 a.m. A man. Same guy from the other day, tall, lean, with that expensive-looking coat. He approached the door like he'd done it before. She met him before the bell even rang. Like she'd been waiting. They disappeared inside. Left together an hour later. 3 days later, same thing. He arrived just before sunrise. Same pattern. Melissa let him in without hesitation. No fumbling. No surprise. Just routine. Routine. That word hit me harder than anything else. The first time I met Melissa, she told me her biggest fear was becoming ordinary. She said she wanted a life that felt alive, not just one that looked good on paper. That had stuck with me. I thought I was helping her build that life. Spontaneous trips, weird hobbies, matching tattoos. We got one drunken night in Nashville. But lately, all of that had faded. She'd stopped making weekend plans, started dressing different, Her clothes weren't just new, they were different. Shorter dresses, higher heels, labels I didn't recognize. A red lipstick she used to say made her look too aggressive, and she'd started avoiding my eyes. It was subtle but unmistakable. When we talk about groceries, the dog, work, she'd keep her gaze just off mine. Like holding eye contact would give something away. I tried to convince myself that maybe we'd just grown distant. It happens. People evolve. But evolution doesn't erase patterns. It doesn't create strangers in your own house. That night, I scrolled back through photos on my phone. A trip to Lake Michigan. Her birthday last year. A blurry *T of us in Halloween costumes. I looked at her smile in those pictures, bright, unguarded, and I realized I hadn't seen it in months. The woman sleeping beside me wasn't the woman in those photos. She'd turned into someone else, and I had no idea who she was seeing when she looked in the mirror. The thing about suspicion is that it festers. It doesn't just sit still, it grows, crawls under your skin, wraps itself around everything you do. By the time Friday rolled around, I couldn't focus at work. Couldn't make it through a conversation without wondering if Melissa was texting him under the table, whispering things she used to say to me into someone else's ear. That's when I decided to stop guessing. I'd installed the tracking app a few days earlier. Quietly. It was a simple GPS tool synced to her phone through a shared iCloud account. Nothing illegal. Just invisible. It didn't give me messages or calls, only location history. I told myself I wouldn't use it unless I had no other choice. That morning gave me that choice. Melissa had mentioned she was going out of town for a veterinary seminar. Some weekend conference in a neighboring city. Said it was just her and 2 coworkers, all women. A chance to network, she'd added with a smile that felt too controlled. I smiled back. Sounds fun. She packed a small overnight bag and left early. I waited until she was a half hour out before opening the app. She hadn't gone north where the seminar was supposed to be. She was headed east. Off the main highway. I zoomed in on the map, heart pounding as the blue dot slowed, then stopped at a house. Not a hotel. Not a conference center. A house. In a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I drove out an hour later. I didn't go straight there. I parked 3 blocks away, walked with my hood up, sunglasses on like I was trying to hide from the truth. By the time I reached the street, I already felt like I knew what I'd find. I crouched behind a hedge across the street, just out of view, and waited. 1 hour. Then 2. Then she stepped out of the house. Melissa. My wife. In jeans I'd never seen before, a fitted coat that clung to her like it had been chosen with care. Her hair was down, loose, exactly how she used to wear it when we were dating. And then him. The man from the security footage. From the scarf. From the early morning door footage. He walked out behind her, casually, like he belonged there. Like this wasn't a secret, just routine. They didn't hide. They didn't look around. He slipped his arm around her waist like it was second nature. She leaned into him. They kissed. Not quick. Not nervous. Comfortable. She laughed, tilting her head back. He kissed her neck. I couldn't breathe. It was one thing to suspect. To guess. To feel cold emptiness whenever she smiled without letting it reach her eyes. But to see it. To have it shoved in my face with no room left for doubt, that broke something. They walked together down the street toward a nearby cafe. I followed from a distance, keeping to the other side. They ordered drinks, found a table outside, and talked like people who'd done it 100 times before. She touched his hand. He leaned in close. There was no panic. No hiding. Just comfort. Familiarity. Eventually, they stood up and walked back toward the house. Melissa leaned into him again as they approached the door. They disappeared inside, the door clicking shut behind them. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, I walked back to my truck, hands shaking. I sat behind the wheel for what felt like an hour, staring through the windshield without really seeing. My throat was dry. My hands were cold. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in stunned silence like I'd witnessed a death. And maybe I had the death of what I thought my life was. She hadn't just cheated. She'd built a life with someone else. A rhythm. A place. And somehow I hadn't seen it. Not really. Not until now. I didn't say anything when Melissa got back from her seminar. She walked in Sunday evening like nothing had changed. Set her bag by the door, kicked off her shoes, gave me a soft smile. Missed you, she said. I smiled back. Nodded. Said, glad you're home. And just like that, we slid back into the script: dinner, dishes, light TV. Her head on my shoulder. My hand on her knee. It all felt like performance art. A hollow recreation of what used to be real. But inside I was gone. That night, I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling while her breathing steadied into sleep. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. I felt something colder. Strategic. That part of me, the part that measured bolts to the millimeter and could hear when a lock wasn't aligned, had taken over. And that part didn't get emotional. Prepared. The next morning I left early. Told her I had back-to-back client meetings. She barely looked up from her phone. I drove across town to a self-storage facility. Rented a unit under a business alias. Paid 6 months in advance. That week, I began moving my life out one box at a time. Tools first. Everything from my dad's workshop that I'd inherited. Then heirlooms. My grandfather's watch, my mom's old photo albums, a box of childhood drawings I didn't even know I still had until I found them in the back of the hall closet. I labeled everything with numbers instead of names. Made sure each item had a scanned backup. Melissa didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. On Tuesday, I took out half of our joint savings. Not all, just enough to safeguard myself. I left her a clean split, untouched and unbothered. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a clean exit. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment across town. Modest, quiet, utilities included, month-to-month lease. I told the landlord it was for temporary business travel. Paid first and last month in cash. By Wednesday, I had a folder. The folder contained everything. Screen captures of GPS logs. Footage from our front door camera. Still images of her hugging him in the driveway. Walking hand in hand to the cafe. Receipts from the cafe. Timeline notes. All neatly printed and organized. I didn't want a he said she said mess. I wanted indisputable proof, compiled with the precision of a man trained to find weak points in the most secure systems. Thursday, I met with an attorney. She was no-nonsense, sharp-eyed, and calm. I laid everything out on the table. She flipped through the photos, expression unreadable, then nodded slowly. "We can move fast on this," she said. "No kids. No entanglements beyond shared property. With this much evidence, you'll be in a strong position." "I want it clean," I told her. "No confrontation. No dragging things out. You'll need to leave her a copy. Signed. Notarized." I nodded. "That's the plan." We drafted the documents. Friday, I took a final sweep through the house while Melissa was at work. I walked through each room with a sort of mechanical grace, picking up only what mattered. I packed photos, not the ones of us, but the ones before us. I took my side of the bookshelves, my half of the tools. Every drawer I opened, I closed afterward like I was never there. I left the wedding photo. That night, we ate dinner in silence. She was distracted, scrolling through her phone between bites. Occasionally she'd smile at something on the screen, not at me. I watched her, wondering how many dinners she'd eaten with him, wondering if she used the same silverware, if she cooked for him the way she used to cook for me when we were new and stupid and in love. It didn't hurt anymore, just felt like watching a stranger inhabit someone else's skin. By Sunday, everything was in place. I had my documents, my apartment, my exit strategy. I had changed all my logins, rerouted my mail. I had backups of everything I needed and none of what I didn't. I had become invisible right under her nose, and she never noticed a thing. Monday arrived like a calm before the storm. The air felt still, quiet, the kind of morning where you know something is about to shift, but nobody else does. Melissa was already up, humming faintly as she straightened the pillows on the couch. She kissed my cheek on her way out the door, same as always. "Have a good one," she said, tossing me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You too," I replied, and just like that, she was gone. I watched through the window as her car pulled out of the driveway. I didn't move until the taillights disappeared. Then I began. The envelope had been sitting on my nightstand all weekend. Cream-colored, thick, with our names written in my handwriting. Inside were the signed divorce papers, notarized and stamped. A copy of the evidence file. Photos, GPS logs, footage stills, an itemized breakdown of the financial split. And finally, a single handwritten note, scrawled on the same stationery we used for our wedding thank you cards. "Melissa, no more lies. This is what you chose. Tom. Beside the envelope, I placed a small black ring box. Inside was her wedding ring, the same one I'd found in the glove compartment, the one she used to swear she'd never take off. It still had a faint fingerprint smudge on the band. I walked through the house slowly, touching nothing, noticing everything. I looked at the framed vacation photos, the coffee mug she loved, the throw blanket she always curled up under during storms. It all felt borrowed now, like I'd been living in someone else's memory. I left behind the keys, set them on the entryway table next to the bowl where we used to keep them. I removed my name from the smart home app, disconnected my phone from the system, disabled the doorbell camera, factory reset the thermostat, the alarm system, the garage door remote. No footprints. In the garage, I collected the last of my tools, just the essentials. My drill, my measuring tape, the set of hex wrenches my father gave me when I opened my first shop. I closed the garage door behind me like I was sealing something shut for good. Inside, the last thing I removed were the family photos. Not all of them, just the ones that included both of us. I took them down carefully, not out of anger, but because they didn't belong anymore. I left the frames empty on the wall. Silent gaps where our story used to hang. I didn't leave a forwarding address. No contact number. No note beyond what was already in the envelope. I shut down my old phone, did a full wipe, and left it on the kitchen counter with the charger coiled neatly beside it. Melissa would walk in and find the house exactly as she left it, minus one person. And that was the point. I left through the side door, pulling it shut behind me with the gentleness of someone closing a chapter. By noon I was gone. No dramatic goodbye. No confrontation. No explosion of emotions. Just absence. And when she walked back into that house hours later, all she'd find was silence. Silence and the truth she thought she could hide from. 3 days after I left, I met with Alex. He was in his final year of college, a quiet, thoughtful kid who took after Melissa in patience and after me in stubbornness. We sat at a corner table in a coffee shop near campus, a place with mismatched chairs and the smell of burnt espresso hanging in the air. He sipped his drink and studied my face. "You okay, Dad?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I reached into my bag and slid a folder across the table. "I need you to look through this. No commentary until you've seen everything." Alex opened it. Photos. Security footage, stills. Logs. Statements. A full record of everything that had unfolded over the last month. He said nothing for a long time, flipping each page slowly like each one was a rung on a ladder pulling him into cold, hard clarity. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I knew something was wrong," he said quietly. "But I didn't think it was this." "I didn't either," I admitted. "But this is the truth and I thought you deserved to know." He didn't ask questions. Didn't beg for explanations. Instead, he nodded once, shut the folder, and said the words I hadn't expected to hear. "I'm done with her." "Alex, no. If she could do this to you, she doesn't get to pretend she's still the same mom. I love her, but I don't want her in my life right now." There was a sadness in his voice that cut deeper than anger ever could. 7 years passed. Life moved on, not in dramatic swings, but through quiet moments. I took a job teaching vocational courses at the local tech college, safe design, home security systems, even a class on forensic locksmithing. I rented a small house on the edge of town, just big enough for a workshop and a vegetable garden. And then I met Jane. She owned an antique shop with a love for brass hardware and creaky floorboards. She had her own past, one she didn't hide, and we found peace in our mutual understanding that life rarely unfolds the way you expect. We didn't rush anything. We built something quietly with care. When Alex married Kayla, Jane and I were there. Melissa came too, sitting in the last row. She looked smaller, somehow alone, like a side note in a story she no longer controlled. After the ceremony, during the photos, Alex pulled me and Jane aside. "Just you two for this one," he said, waving the photographer forward. The photo was later posted online with a caption that simply read, "To the ones who never lied." Who stayed? Friends commented, family liked it, but I knew who it was meant for. Melissa saw it. I heard she left the reception early, crying. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt finished. Standing beside Jane, watching Alex dance with his wife under a string of soft lights, I knew that the past didn't need to be avenged. It had already been replaced.